Appeals to authority and why we're expected to trust the experts regardless of the evidence. We've been told a lot these days to trust the experts, to trust the doctors, trust the scientists. And while this is a good sort of approach to things, it's not necessarily looking at the evidence. Sometimes it's contrary to the evidence. Sometimes we don't even think about looking at the evidence. We're just supposed to sort of believe what we're told on the TV and think that that's the truth, trust that that's the facts, trust that that's sort of looking at the evidence. And while it's good to look at experts and trust experts, we have to also be cognizant of the possibility that sometimes, like, just because someone is an authority or an expert on a topic, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are looking at the evidence, that they are presenting sort of an accurate representation of the views of their group that they belong to. And just for some context, an argument from authority or an appeal to authority is a form of argument in which the opinions of an authority on a topic is used as evidence to support an argument. And it's true that, like, scientists and doctors, or anyone else for that matter, could be an expert in a topic that they are talking about, but that doesn't always mean that they are following the evidence, that they are looking at the evidence, that they are looking at the sort of facts of the matter. While someone could be an expert in a topic, or they could be an authority on a topic, they might hold a minority position, or they might have a belief that isn't consistent with the rest of the people in the industry. And the whole idea of an appeal to authority is that you are asked to just sort of trust an opinion because of who is saying it, regardless of what they're saying or regardless of what the evidence is. Just the main idea of an appeal to an authority is that the person who's saying it is more important than what they're saying. This is obviously a flawed idea because what matters most is, like, the facts, the evidence, and the truth of the matter, and not who's saying it. Because whenever someone is saying something, there's always like an incentive, or there's a possibility that they have incentives that aren't sort of pure, that aren't honest. And of course, like, this isn't to disregard experts, because we should surely go to experts when we have questions about certain topics that those people are experts in. Like, this isn't saying that we shouldn't trust experts at all. In the past, there was a very famous American zoologist, and his last name was Painter. And he was sort of considered to be an authority on chromosomes. And so he had said that there were 24 chromosomes, and he had written about this, and was sort of published for saying this. And it ended up that there were actually 23 chromosomes. Even in textbooks, they would show the 23 chromosomes, and then they would say underneath, there are 24 chromosomes. It was a strange sort of situation, because this was something that the majority of people believed, that was published in textbooks, and that was just sort of the majority position or belief, was that there were 24 chromosomes, even though the evidence was the contrary. The evidence showed that there were only 23 chromosomes, but still people sort of believed this number that came from this trusted authority or this expert in the topic or in the subject. And so they went kind of against the evidence that they had, and they just relied on this person who was saying it, regardless of the evidence, regardless of the facts. And this happened for a little while, and eventually people came to their senses and realized, okay, well, like, we should just actually go with the evidence and not let an authority be the decider of sort of what the truth of the matter is in this situation. But, like, why this matters, though, is because we're always told, or we're always expected to trust the authorities, to trust sort of the science, not question the science. This is interesting because we don't know what the truth of the matter is, right? We don't know actually what the experts believe if we just go to one person who's an authority on a topic, or the one person who gets sort of to talk to us. I kind of like really got thinking about this because I was doing some research on a topic, and I had talked to my brother about it, and he then sent me an article about why you shouldn't do your own research and why you should just trust the authorities, which I thought was ironic because the person who was writing this story or this article, like, wasn't an authority in the subject that he was talking about. And a big thing too is that, like, there's a lot of different diverse sort of opinions, there's different pieces of evidence, there's a range of ideas, and to just trust like one person out of, say, like 100 or 10 people who are experts in a subject, something doesn't necessarily mean that they're correct, doesn't necessarily mean that they have the evidence, or that they're looking at the right evidence. And again, like I said, like, sometimes people have sort of perverse incentives. Sometimes they're motivated by power or money or like other things like political influences. And so this prevents them from necessarily representing the facts accurately. A lot of times people will say like, well, it's anti-science or like it's political to do your own research on a topic. But the question is, like, how do you know what the majority of people believe about a subject? Like, how do you know what the majority position is? Just because sort of the government or the news broadcaster chooses to put one person on TV and then, or on, on their website or whatever, and give their opinion, that doesn't mean that that person is the only expert on the subject. That doesn't mean that that person has the majority position. All that means is that that's the authority, or that was the expert that was chosen to present an opinion to you. This is sort of what people do when they're trying to influence you or change your mind or make you think about things in a certain way, is that they choose an expert of their liking and they use that person sort of as a representation of all experts, of all people on the topic. And this is kind of a dangerous thing because it creates this idea in the minds of most people that, well, this is the truth, this is the fact of the matter, but like it might not be. And the only way you can actually find out for yourself is to do a little bit of research. And I'm not saying that Wikipedia is like the best source of information, but like you could go to Wikipedia and you could see that despite what the person, the chosen TV expert is saying, that actually the majority position is different from that. But it's important to do some research to make sure that the ideas that are being told to you, or what you're being told, is actually like accurate, that actually represents reality, because you don't know that unless you check for yourself, that you do some research for yourself. And not everyone wants to do research for themselves. Most people want to just have like a simple understanding of reality, the one that gets fed to them through the media, and that's fine for them. Sort of my main point here is that we can look to experts when we have questions about specific topics. There's no reason why you should disregard an expert just because they're an expert. That's irrational. That doesn't make sense. But what is important here is look at what the evidence is, look at what the facts are, and don't worry too much about who's saying it. Like if someone is a serial liar, then you should be conscious of that. You should be cautious of what they're saying, because if they have a history of lying, there's a high chance that the evidence that they're presenting right now is inaccurate or isn't true or is false or whatever. If at the same time, like if you get like an expert who's paid or works for, say, like a mining company, and they're telling you that mining is good for the environment, it's like, well, you have to also be cognizant of the fact that this person has incentives. They have financial, they have political incentives that go against presenting sort of an accurate representation of the details. To look at the evidence, look at the facts, and don't worry too much about who's saying it, because a person who is not an expert at all can still have the right facts, and an expert can have the wrong facts or have inaccurate facts. If you ask anyone, a famous physicist, they're probably going to mention Einstein, and so he was definitely an authority on the topic of physics. Sometimes people quote his sort of comments about other topics like religion. There's one quote that I've heard a lot, which I think it's usually taken out of context as well, and that is like he said that God doesn't play dice. But the idea is that like he was an expert in physics, but he's not an expert in religion, he's not an expert in faith, he's not an expert in anything sort of other than physics. And so to sort of rely on his name and his authority and then taking what he said as being representative of like facts and reality or truth is like not really a good idea, because although he does have authority, he isn't an authority sometimes on the topics that he's being quoted or referenced to. My question to you is, are you looking at the facts? Are you looking at the evidence? Or are you relying on authorities and experts to tell you how to think about topics, how to look at them? So let me know in the comments below what you think. If you found this entertaining or informative, click that like button. If you are curious about learning about how to think, but you don't want to be told what to think, then click that subscribe button, because that's what I'm here for. You've been watching Making Sense with Robbie. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk next time. Goodbye.